work. This is the second event that the Presbytery of Lanark have organised, because we feel committed to youth work, and we want to show that, certainly for us and for the Church of Scotland as a whole, youth work is very important, and especially during this time. I think it's fair to say that one of the hardest hit parts of society in this COVID pandemic has been our children, and things are constantly changing daily for everyone, and how that has impacted on our children is a very important thing. And I'm aware that restrictions have changed dramatically since the last time we did this Zoominar, and things are changing all the time. So I think it's good tonight to be able to join together to chat about some of the issues that we're facing, and to talk about how we can see youth work going forward through this pandemic and into the future. So tonight we are joined with Susie Farren, who is from the Church of Scotland. She is the Young People and Young Adults Development Worker for the Church of Scotland. So we welcome Susie. We're also joined by Tim Frew, the CEO of YouthLink Scotland, and Tim, I'm told, was a former youth worker himself. And we're also joined with Lucy Muir from Messy Church, who is the Messy Church founder and team leader. So we welcome all of you tonight to chat about children's work and youth work. So how tonight is going to work is each of our guests are going to talk a bit about youth work, about their experiences and the reflections over the pandemic period for a short, maybe 5, 6, 7 minute period. And then we're going to get into questions, and we're going to be aided with the questions from Bryan Kerr, who you saw at the beginning. Bryan is minister at Greyfriars Parish Church in Lanark, and he is also, for his sins, a member of the Church of Scotland COVID group, who have been working tirelessly for the last few months with the Scottish Government, looking at regulations and putting together all the, what version of the guidelines are we on now, Bryan? 7.15?
No. Don't do the 1.5 thing. It's just 7.1. And I'll give you a sneak peek into what's about to be a major revision in the next 2 weeks, but we'll talk about that. And I know it's a good revision, Susie, don't look at it like that. And then we'll be able to let you know what's happening at the end of the meeting as well.
Wow, another revision. Yeah, I feel ministry has become spending my life reading regulations and guidelines. It's not fun these days, but we are grateful to Bryan and the other members of the COVID group for working their way through everything the Scottish Government sends out to make sure that our churches and our buildings and what we do is safe. So yeah, thank you. So now that we've done introductions and welcome, I think we'll just fire on in. So I think we're beginning with Susie.
Indeed. Okay, super. Lovely to be here with you all again this evening. It's one of those ones that I have this national remit, but I very rarely actually get to see an awful lot of people all at the same time. So it's really, really good to see you all. And yeah, we hope that what we kind of share today is going to be of some help for you. If at any other point after this or what have you want to kind of get in contact, maybe you've got more questions, more things, please feel free to do that. My role is very much here to support all of you. So please do kind of get in contact. We'll stick kind of my email address and all of that in the chat for you kind of later. Where are we now? What's been happening? I think for all of us, it's been a tough old few months. And it's been a tough kind of couple of months since we kind of first met here probably about 2 months ago. And I think by now our heads are all massively muddled. We have found it incredibly hard to keep up with all the changes that there has been in the guidance, the changes in what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do, what we should be doing, and all of those things. But also kind of there's been changes in kind of what people want and what people need, as they've been finding that their situations have been changing, their needs have also changed. So the church has been one that is known not known for its speed in reaction to certain things. And this has been a time where we've really had to kind of keep on our feet and really kind of keep reacting, which takes a huge amount of energy. So I think an awful lot of us are kind of feeling maybe a wee bit jaded, a wee bit tired. We just want it over and done with. We just want it done. But that's not happening right now. So we kind of need to get ourselves a wee bit of encouragement and ready for the next kind of phase that we're going to kind of be entering in. What's been happening in terms of work that churches have been doing with the young people all over the country. For some, everything stopped. They've actually found it too difficult to kind of get anything going or to do anything, or the things that you've maybe tried have maybe not worked. Online hasn't worked. Maybe you've not had the expertise within your congregation and within your team in order to kind of do that. Or you found that if you had, actually, a lot of our children and young people have had enough and they're not wanting to engage online. They're finding it too difficult. Their brains are kind of sitting there thinking, you know what, I'm seeing somebody on a screen, but I still feel like I'm on my own and that's not doing me any good. So actually it's not really helpful for me to kind of join in with this stuff. So they're opting out a wee bit, which can be really, for us, really demoralizing. That we put things on and actually we're not meeting the needs that we kind of know are there. I think some of us have equally got a feeling really under pressure that we really need to get back to normal, and that's difficult when we feel this pressure and we know that things aren't actually going to get back to normal anytime soon. That can leave us feeling demoralized. We can start to feel really anxious. We maybe kind of start worrying as to what's going to come. For some of us, we've maybe been back starting things again in our buildings, and for some that has been a really joyous occasion. But for others, we found that that's not really worked either. For some, maybe kind of being in a space where you have to keep 2 meters distance apart and you need to be wearing face masks and all of the rest of it, it just feels a wee bit unnatural. And that's difficult. But yeah, it's not all bad news. Yes, stuff is challenging, but for others, we've found that things are working. We've found that folk have found real strength in changing and doing things small, and kind of really focusing on small groups, the small numbers. That's been really good. We've maybe found that for some in particular, the online stuff has really worked, particularly for those young people and those children that maybe struggle in large groups of people face to face, those sorts that are often on the edges of things. Actually, some of them have really flourished during this time of kind of being online and things kind of going in that way. We've maybe seen in quite a number of places a real increase in engagement with families. We've found that because we're doing things online, because parents are having to kind of set the things up, that actually the engagement of families has gone up. We've had families engaging in godly play circles, in Sunday schools. I've had parents joining in with the actions to kids songs as we've kind of done our things on Zoom, which has been great. So that some stuff has been really good. We've also maybe seen families taking on the ownership of faith formation with their children and young people a wee bit. Maybe the activities that we're maybe sending out to them. Families are taking it upon themselves to meet maybe with another family or for the kids to get together. And they've been able to do some of this stuff together, which has been really, really good to see. So some things are difficult, but some things have been working and going really well, and people are kind of building on those. For some of us, we've taken this kind of as an opportunity to completely rethink what it is that we're doing, to go back to the why do we work with children and young people, and to reconsider what it is that actually that they need and what we can do as to how that can kind of work. We've maybe been going back to basics a wee bit, really recognizing that actually what young people need is relationship. What can we do in these times to kind of build relationships? we can go back to basics. We can pick up the phone. We can send a birthday card. We can do those sorts of things. So that's been really good. So I think generally there's been a huge number of kind of mixed emotions. There's been a lot of anxiety, a lot of actually fear for the future. If we've maybe kind of fallen out of touch with some of our children and young people, there's a real fear around, will we actually ever get them back? Will they come back? Will they want to re-engage when we're able to kind of do stuff? And that can be tough. That can be really tough on our emotions. So I think there is a lot of exhaustion out there too, but there's hope as well. So I heard a phrase recently: out of chaos comes creativity. And I think that really has happened. Out of this total time of chaos, we've seen an awful lot of creativity happen, which has been absolutely brilliant. We've started to see folk adapting what they originally do, maybe looking at how they can do things differently. And I think there has been a really worthwhile shift in focus, a shift from programs to relationships. The sorts of things that we've been talking about for a long time have actually kind of maybe had to happen, which is no bad thing in many senses. So I think now we're in this position where wherever it is that we've been, whatever our journey has been up to this point, we need to kind of take stock of that. We need to think that where we've been and what our journey is, doesn't matter if it's different to the people down the road. What the journey we've been on is okay. That's our journey. We need to own that, and we need to kind of work from it. And maybe we need to just take the next small step. There's a big journey that we've got ahead of us. Let's not think way out there, because suddenly the task becomes really big and kind of unmanageable. But let's take just the next step. And then once that one's done, well, we'll take the one after that. And then we'll take the one after that. We'll just take it small and slow. And with that change of mindset, let's kind of start to see possibilities rather than always seeing closed doors. It can be really, really easy to kind of start to think, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't do the other. But what can we do? What possibilities are we being offered that we can kind of move forward from? We've seen so many people go and be delivering bags, whether they're food, whether they're craft activities, whether it's messy church in a bag or what have you. So much of that has been going on. Can we take it to the next step and consider some of those things maybe as doorstep discipleship? How can we build the relationship when we're delivering a bag? So not just think that we're delivering something, but actually building that relationship at that time. So we know it's been tough. It's been tough all over the country. That's okay. And it doesn't matter where we've got to thus far. Let's just take the next small step and move onwards.
Thank you, Susie. I found that really insightful, and I loved that phrase, out of chaos comes creativity. And I think certainly, I'm sure many of us will have seen many examples of different kinds of creativity and people finding new and creative ways of doing youth work, however challenging it may be. But I really liked your focus on relationships, and I think that's something that we all need to kind of take going forward, is the importance of relationships. So moving on, we're now going to go and hear from Tim Frew, who is the CEO of YouthLink Scotland. So over to Tim.
Hey there, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me along to your session tonight. And we've just come off the back of a 2-day national conference for youth work, where we've had a range of different folk there. And the day one was about resilience and resourcefulness. And I would say across the youth work sector, and this is, there's 60 national voluntary organisations involved in YouthLink, your Prince's Trust, Bernardo's, Uniform Groups, Church of Scotland, and a range of all 32 local authorities. And that kind of mix of people together. Day one, we just looked at resilience and resourcefulness. Just kind of pause, take a breath, look at just what we've achieved. And when you're in this kind of this responsive thing where you're just reacting, you're just trying to keep things alive, keep things going for young people and keep youth work happening. It's very difficult to kind of stop, take some time aside and go, wow, just look what has been achieved. Just look at the efforts, look at the ways people have readapted their services and kind of supported each other as well to do that. So that was kind of quite encouraging. Today, the second day of the conference was about reimagining. So you'll remember that sort of, I suppose, a couple of months into the COVID-19, people started talking about building back better, or can we do things differently? Can there be a blended way of doing things? And part of that was before schools went properly back, and it was trying to reimagine what could that be like? Do we need exams every year? Do exams actually cause some stress for young people? Yes, we know that they do. It doesn't necessarily make them a bad thing either. But what different ways do we want to do things? What different ways do we want to do things in the environment? What different ways do we want to do things, in terms of how we travel, how we commute, how we collaborate, how do we want to work in the future? So that kind of reimagination and thinking what might be has been good today, because it's been very much, tying in with what Susie said, trying to kind of lift our horizons a little bit and imagine what we can do for young people. I really don't want to go into a lot of info and stats. I think Susie has covered that really well in terms of how it is for young people. What I would say is never stop listening to young people. You're all involved in youth work or children's work in some way, and you will be the best judge of the young people that are in your care. We have a lot of stuff going on around national information and national stats that we can kind of draw up. And, yes, there's concerns. We did a survey called Lockdown Lowdown with the Scottish Youth Parliament and Young Scot. The Children's Parliament have also done surveys. Public Health are doing, surveys. There's lots of kind of research and so on going on, and an interest and a concern around young people's mental health and well-being at the moment. Young people themselves are worried about their own mental health and well-being. 77% are. 2 in 5 young people are not confident about accessing information about that. 70% of young people are concerned about their financial, kind of situation, the financial situation out there. And sometimes we can assume what the things that young people are thinking about, but quite often they're the same as the rest of us. What about the economy? What about, what's going on in America? What's, all that whole kind of news cycle that we're in as well, and kind of managing that. And obviously with the exams, half were moderately or extremely concerned about exams and coursework. So there is anxiety out there. There is a concern about what life will be like emerging from this. There is concern about social isolation and mental health and well-being. And that's something that's been taken very seriously, I would say, by government, by public health, by all of us, be it in the church or wherever we're working with young people. And the way that it's being understood within government terms is a 4 harms framework. So thinking about what the kind of 4 harms are for not having activities happening, especially some of those contact activities for children and young people. And that has to be set alongside the kind of mitigating and reducing the risk of the spread of the virus. So for children and young people, thankfully we have had no deaths in Scotland of children and young people related to COVID. And we had a very interesting input from the leader, one of the lead people within Public Health Scotland at our conference. It may well be on YouTube, so we'll kind of try and get the link to you. Just about actually the very well managed and low spread of the virus and transmission in schools at the moment, and how, that's quite a reassuring message, and that's not to take anything away from where we're at in a bigger picture in terms of what's going on across the UK and what other public health specialists might be looking at. So there's this kind of balance between mitigating the risk and the harm to young people in terms of keeping activities open, alongside the kind of managing that community spread of the virus, and clinical directors and so on in health looking at that. And so that's a kind of discussion that's ongoing. What I would say is that I think the sector has stepped up, has responded really well. So delivering food banks, coordinating and supporting community hubs, promoting volunteering, adapting and being agile, to digital youth work. Some people were doing some digital youth work before this, but many weren't, and have adapted so quickly to actually make sure that that contact's there. And especially for young people who were facing digital poverty as well and not having access to devices, there's been a big investment in that. And I think as well, in terms of repositioning services, doing outreach and detached work, seeing how we can use other facilities and buildings, these are all things that are being looked at. There is a COVID-19 children and young people recovery group in government, specifically thinking about vulnerable and isolated young people. And that's something that we certainly have fed into, and other agencies. But again, I would encourage you, if you're working with young people directly, please speak to them, please be in touch. If you haven't been in touch with some young people, and let's not assume that the system, if you like, education, social work and others are always picking that up. Because I know, and from past experience, that youth workers often are the people, and churches and communities, where they notice things, they notice where young people are and where they're not. So we want to be doing everything we can to ensure that young people's well-being is first and foremost in our thinking right now. I prepared nothing, which is probably why I'm rambling a little bit. Apologies about that. But maybe just to say, in terms of the guidance, I think that's a real measure of just how significant the church and the faith community is in Scotland, that we have the most complexity around the guidance. And the reason for that is that we are involved in so many aspects of public life and social life, so be that from, weddings, funerals, services, childcare provision that's happening, uniformed organisations using your buildings and other organisations, food banks. I don't need to tell you all this because this is the stuff you all know already. But I would say I've seen, as someone who sits, who has done church youth work in the past, but also sits in that kind of secular space, if you like, now within the kind of wider youth work world and with education and others. And really people noticing how much activity it happens and connects to faith communities. So I hope I'm trying to kind of put a bit of a silver lining onto something that's very complex. The fact that you've got all this guidance that seems to cross, and what does that mean? How does that relate to this? And they don't understand this. I think that in itself, and the fact that people are trying to kind of work out how to make that work, says something about the impact of the church throughout Scotland. So thank you to everybody that's been doing that work.
Well, thank you, Tim, for your thoughts and reflections on how you see youth work and what's been going on for you. I don't know about anyone else, but I found the statistic of 77% of young people feel they are struggling with their mental health. That is an astronomical number. And 2 out of 5 feel that they don't know how or where to go for help. I find that hugely worrying. But as Tim says, the flip side is the amount of work that faith communities are doing with our young people, which I think is a great thing. And I certainly know from the Church of Scotland's point of view that the engagement has been great and well received by young people. So that being said, we're now going to move on to our final speaker this evening before we get into the nitty-gritty of questions. So I'm going to hand over to Lucy Moore, who is the founder of Messy Church and a team leader for Messy Church. So Lucy.
Thank you very much for having me tonight. I don't feel I've got the right accent, or I'm on the right side of the border. And I was looking at your guidelines today for your different levels and being very, very envious because it seems that you can carry on meeting in churches, which is something we can't do down in England, of course. So it's great that you've still got that opportunity. Lovely to be here. Messy Church. It's, if I'm honest, when the pandemic struck back in March, I was thinking, well, this is it now. This is the end of Messy Church. So many people find it, it's obviously a great thing to do, but it's really, really hard work. And I thought, oh, crumbs, people will see this as an excuse to say, oh, we can just stop and nobody will criticize us because it's the pandemic, and we can move on to something much easier and more containable, less messy. And And I have been blown away, actually, over the last 6 months by I think the Spirit of God, alive and kicking. And I think the image that comes most into my mind is of living water, the living water of the Spirit of God bubbling up in all sorts of ways through the Messy Church network. And it's really hard to say, because what we want to do is encourage everybody and encourage each other at this really tough time. And sometimes when you say, gosh, look at this amazing thing that this church has been doing, somebody else reacts by saying, oh, I feel kicked in the teeth by that because we can't do that at the moment. And I think what Susie said is so important about doing what we can and not getting stressed about what we can't do, but doing what we can and knowing that we're the experts for our local area, we're the experts for our community. And just because the church up the road is doing something, it doesn't mean that that's right for us. We can be doing nothing. That can be a really, really good thing to do at the moment. It can be a sabbatical, it can be a Sabbath, it can be a jubilee, it can be a rest that a lot of people really, really need. Or we can be doing all sorts of different things. And that's something to celebrate as well. But only we know, and it's about having the confidence that we're listening to God and that we can discern what God wants for our community, for the people that we've learned to love over the last months and years of doing Messy Church with them. So what's been going on? Well, some people have stopped for now, and that's fine. As I say, it's really good to have a rest and to have a rethink and to regroup, to keep our older helpers safe. That's so important. That's a really good option. And also it reminds us what we really love about Messy Church and what's precious to us. And it can show us what we're missing by not doing it, so that we're not just churning it out like a sausage machine, but can actually one day perhaps go back into it with more intentionality, more purposefulness, more intention to make disciples and grow disciples through Messy Church. So doing nothing is a good and godly thing. And what have people been doing? A whole range of stuff. The thing about chaos bringing creativity. Chaos and mess go hand in hand quite a lot of the time, don't they? And messiness does beget creativity. It's one of the values, of course. So the main things that people have been doing, I do apologise for the creaking in the background. It's the dog. She's desperate for a cuddle. I'll just tickle her. A lot of Messy Churches have been doing Messy Church in a bag, which has been great fun, and either delivering when that was possible or inviting people to come and pick up bags, or in some cases giving them out through schools, which has been great with the cooperation of the school. So, things that people can do at home, that faith at home, inviting the whole family to do something together, and actually to have something concrete, something to hold in this virtual world has been very, very precious to a lot of families. So that's been good. Sending the gospel home in a bag has been very good. A lot of Messy Churches have gone online, of course they have, with Facebook Live and YouTube and Zooming and so on, and that's been great. Not an option for everybody because of various, different reasons, but a lot of people have stepped out of their comfort zone and given it a whirl. So that's been great. There have been Messy Church at home sessions on the website that people have just downloaded and sent round as a link. and inviting people to do them. We have no idea if they're done or not. It's very difficult to tell, and that can be a little bit discouraging when we feel that we're sending out all this stuff and not getting anything back, not getting the smiles that we would normally get at a messy church, and not getting the thanks, not getting the people lighting up in front of you. But we keep on. So that's been good. And another aspect of messy church has been people taking pastoral care really seriously. And there's been some shining examples of messy church teams and leaders who have really looked after their families and just kept on ringing and texting and noticing people, just like Jesus noticed people, just making sure that people still know that they matter. So that's all been really good. And of course, up to recently, we've been able to meet face to face again, but in a really, really controlled way. So I suppose for some personality types, then that's a real relief. And the whole kind of doing messy church in a really regimented way, with people sitting in their places and being quiet and not shouting or running around, and in fact being very, very tidy, has been a lovely thing for certain personality types. For some of us, it's taken that joyful, celebratory kind of all the friendships and the relationships crossing of the generations. Not seeing that has been hard, but it's better than nothing for some churches. So the instructions or suggestions really for that are on the website, and Bryan's been working very hard to make them suitable for Scotland, and using cryptic terms to me like Kirk sessions, and yeah, there was another one, vestries happened as well. So there is a worked way of doing messy church there. And I think there's so much to mention because there's so much life in the network, but I mustn't go on. I think the other main thing to mention is keeping connected, and the network of messy church leaders has come together in a very unexpected and unusual way around the world, which has been brilliant, because we've loved meeting on Facebook Live on a Wednesday at 9 in the morning and 8 in the evening. There'll be one going on tonight very shortly, and bringing people together just to chat, just with somebody talking about an aspect of messy church or their mission, their missional community perhaps, and that connectivity around the world where we give each other hope, because New Zealand were doing messy church face to face again when we were still deep in lockdown, and it really was a time of going, there is hope. This will pass. We are connected around the world. Our family in New Zealand are going ahead with messy church again. One day that will be us. So we can celebrate with them and look forward to that time. It's very Adventy, isn't it, at the moment? So lots more to share, but perhaps just the only thing to mention, just to be clear, if you're thinking about messy church under these circumstances, is just to be absolutely clear as when it comes to the guidelines that that messy church is an act of worship. And not a children's activity or a youth activity, but just to just be absolutely clear that, and don't blur the guidelines, don't blur the so don't try and mingle things together, but just say we are an act of worship, so we follow the guidelines for that act of worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, for that. And certainly I loved the end of how you kind of summed up there about, you know, that we have hope. And I think that's something that we all need to hold on to, you know, going through this really difficult period that we're in now, but also coming up to Advent, as you said, and focus on what you can do, not what you can't. And I think we have to remember that in all aspects of life, not just for youth work and not just for church, but for everything. I know certainly as a minister, I have ranted almost daily to Bryan about why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? And I think it's really reminded me to focus on what we can do at the moment and celebrate that and do what we can, rather than get grumpy and angry about what we can't do. And I like the theme that ran through, I think, all our speakers tonight, which is this idea of connectedness and relationships, which I think is so important anyway at this time, but in particular with our young people who maybe do feel disconnected from one another and disconnected from what's going on as well. So I think this idea of connectedness is so important. So thank you to Susie, to Tim and to Lucy for their thoughts and the reflections. And now we're going to hand over, I'm going to hand over to Bryan for questions. Now, if you would like to ask a question, I'm sure many of you now will be familiar with how Zoom works. If you click your participants button, and on your right hand side, you should then have some functions. And if you click the more button, you should see a hand wavy symbol. So if you'd like to ask a question, then please do press your hand wavy button or use the chat, and we'll try and answer as many questions as possible. But I'll hand over to Bryan now for questions.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, that was fabulous to see and to hear from all the speakers. And I think our guidance in Scotland is now reaching a tipping point. I don't know if Tim would agree in this, but we're now getting to the stage where it's less about what you can't do and the things that you have to stop and the ways that you have to be restricted. And it's much more about what you can do and what you are able to do and imagine and vision and be at least try and get some semblance of what you would think is normal. It might be in a new way, it might be in a different way, but for me, I think we're beginning to turn a corner. Tim, you're involved in some of the work with the guidance as well. Is that fair, thinking about that shift from can't to can?
Yeah, I think it's the presentation from the public health official that I was referring to was called the Pandemic Balancing Act, and I think that was a good way to frame the kind of mitigation of the wider risks to people's public health and harm. You know, when we went into this first time around, it was closed down and let's get on top of this and we'll see where we are. Now there's a recognition that this is I think it's been said often, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And we need to kind of understand the wider risks and harms that are affecting people. So that's why we're seeing quite a lot of thought and detail of how things can happen in different contexts. Now, of course, with that comes the complexity then of things not quite making sense in all places. I mean, people may could well criticize and say this seems to be making it up as you go along. But another way of looking at it is it's working with people as you go along to try and find, the things that work best. And I suppose if we had a kind of a blanket edict to say you can't do any of this, then what would the impact and harms of some of that be? So, I think those that are in government kind of work closely in terms of the youth work guidance, but ultimately these things do get signed off by government ministers. And I think we just need to be mindful of the complexity that these folk are dealing with. But yes, I absolutely agree that we do need to look and see, and even some of the conversations from public health was, we need to be mindful of not being over cautious actually into some of the activity, especially for children and young people, when actually that could be causing them harm.
I think so, and I think we've discussed this in church as well, that it's good to be cautious, because cautious means that we think through the challenges. Cautious means that we prepare well. Reckless is where we just throw caution to the wind and do anything, and that's not going to help any of us at this point. We are the Presbytery of Lanark and Lanarkshire Trust, as we know. Recklessness does not get you very far very quickly. However, overcautious is a real challenge for us, because there is a real temptation to kind of think about how we need to shut down. We need to keep people safe. And actually, that balancing act is so important, because the balancing between what you can do and what you can't do and what people need, I think, is huge. Just a very brief story. We started 2 weeks ago in Greyfriars. We started the baby and mother and baby group. We were going to start back our toddlers, and then the government changed the childcare guidance when it got finalised, and it was down to 5 adults in the room. We decided it wasn't helpful for us to run our toddlers at that point, so we were scratching our head. 2 mums came to us and said, can you start a baby group? We started a baby group. You can have 10 parents there with children. And the first week we launched it, we had to launch very quickly a second class or group in the afternoon. All the cleaning in between. The cleaner comes in and frantically mops the floor and sanitizes everything. That's on a Wednesday, and we open the spaces on a Thursday morning at 8 a.m. And it's almost like our church is a bit like a Mariah Carey concert, and I'm using Mariah Carey because I know my former student George Snedden is somewhere in the gallery, and he is so into Mariah, it's unbelievable, almost unhealthy, some would say. But in our church in Greyfriars, we are now selling out to mother and baby groups. Last week we sold out in 2.5 minutes. Now, why do I say that? Because it shows there is a need for these type of things. And I think when we're dealing with children or young people or families, whether it's intergenerational worship or activities, we need to think about what can we do and how can we encourage people to actually think about what they can do. So our guidance in the Church of Scotland is starting to shape up. We have moved to our tiered section now, and if you go on, this is just, if you haven't seen the church website, let me just share this with you just now very briefly. On the homepage of the Church of Scotland website, there is a very lovely picture of the coronavirus. We asked it to pose, and in that are all the latest updates that you can get, including how to run a messy church session with my favourite word that has ever been coined, ever in the history of the world. And that is, now hang on, for some reason this isn't working. Sharing is paused. Why is that not going? I have no idea why it's not working. But the favourite thing that we've got is Lou Meister. And I don't know who came up with that phrase, but it is just awesome. So there is the COVID page. You get it to off the homepage just there, and it's got all the different tiles that you need. The running the messy church one, the different roles, and there it's there, the Lou Meister. Someone who can take and show people where the toilets are and make sure they're sanitized. Brilliant job. But here's what's just new today. And I'm hoping you might see this pop up, but you might not. If you go into the church finder, which is just on the homepage, I'll show you that in a minute, and type in your postcode, you can find the churches that are close to you and find your own church. And when you look, here's Greyfriars here, and when you click on the contact, you get all the information about Greyfriars, but you also now get what level that area is in, so that you're able to see quite quickly. Now, if I do this, you should see a pop-up. If Louise can nod if this happens. Did you see the pop-up there? Oh, fabulous. And you can see there in COVID protection level 3, this is what this protection level means for churches and for church work, for worship, for funerals and weddings, for pastoral care, support services, for travel, for schools, and importantly for some of us, school chaplaincy, what you can and can't do, youth work, early learning and childcare, unregulated children's activities, which or those that don't fall under the Care Commission stuff, sport. So everything is there that you can see in different ways. So you get to that off the main page of the Church Scotland website, the Church Finder down in the corner. And we put that on so that it would be a helpful, hopefully, idea that people could very quickly get to the levels and what it means for churches. I did promise you a little sneak, and we are getting our guidance changed now to follow those levels, to think about the things that we can do in church life. So it's not just about buildings, but about the life of the church. People are asking, I'm just looking here on the chat, think about Christmas activities. Now, Susie, this is over to you now, because you've got a little thing to advertise at this point, haven't you?
Absolutely, we've kind of put it in the chat already. So we've recognised that a lot of you need what we've spoken about already. We need connection. And equally, we've found that it's really helpful for folk to be able to share ideas with one another, because it's in doing that we can be more creative, and we can kind of overcome some of the challenges, and we can bounce things off each other. So we're running a series of conversations, which you are all more than welcome to. We are doing one. The first one of those is going to be on Thursday, the 12th of November, where we're going to look at some of these things quite generally. What can we do now? We're kind of moving beyond those kind of initial stages of lockdown, but then in linking very much to this question, on the 23rd of November, which is a Monday evening, 8 till 9 o'clock, we'll kind of be sharing around ideas around Advent and Christmas. So there's those that you can kind of join in. If you want to kind of get the joining details for those, then you just need to send us an email. So it's childrenandyouth@churchofscotland.org.uk. And we're also we have a Facebook group, which the details have been put up in the chat, our Now You're Talking Facebook group, where you can share your ideas. It's not just about us giving you information and resources and ideas that we've found, but it's about you sharing your own ideas and your own questions and your own thoughts. And through that, we've got a real kind of community kind of going, where we're kind of sharing with one another there. But there are lots of kind of resources coming out for kind of Christmas and Advent just now. Lots of stuff kind of coming on, so way too much to share in the next kind of few minutes, but absolutely get on Now You're Talking, join us for the conversations, and we'll kind of help each other out.
I think there are so many ideas coming up already. We have got Cranhill doing a winter wonderland, families in the community, a pack of resources to decorate their windows. Pamela is going to film the cherubs in the church. Now, Pamela, I presume that's your pet name for the children, rather than actually getting the stone cherubs to actually sing in some creepy Doctor Who way. And then YouTube and Facebook, and brilliant. Fantastic. URC Advent box. Yes, I have seen this, and it does look fabulous. They're all sold out, but you can make your own and give them to the kids throughout Advent. Dry Law, sing your favourite carol and be recorded. Just make sure they're singing at home and not in church, please. That's my little advert for when the sweat falls off my brow. Treasure hunt type Advent route in the nearby forest park with families. Brilliant. Just reading Lorna's comment there about really worrying about not having enough children to do their nativity, but they're still meeting on Zoom and using parents to making their costumes, excitement with the children, and record the Zoom nativity so we can share with the church congregation. Seriously, who would have thought 7 months ago that this was where our churches would be? You know, the creativity that's there is just fabulous. Christingles in a bag, absolutely brilliant. We're going to come back to some of these ideas, because we are going to be looking, and in the next part of the guidance that comes out, we are going to be looking at things that we can do. Don't worry. You can have a Christmas tree in church and it can be decorated. You can have Advent candles and they can be lit. You know, Christmas has not been cancelled, despite what some say in the Scottish Parliament. It really hasn't. This, I was saying to someone earlier on this week, if ever we've got a year, this is it. You know, if ever we can talk about the incarnation and God coming into a troubled world, we kind of own that story right now. So let's use it, and let's share it in a new way. So I think there's lots that we can do. We are in Lanark kicking about some ideas using QR codes and windows and different shops. So can we find enough shops in Lanark that have some tenuous connection to the Christmas story? For example, the Jewellers with Gold. Could we have the local estate agent who has one of those computers in the window to put a listing up for a stable, and families go around and QR code it and get a bit of the story as they go, and have a nativity trail? Do you know, there's just so much out there that people are doing. So just, yeah, fabulous. Now, we noticed a couple of people have unmuted themselves, and that may be because they're wanting to ask some questions, which would be awesome. Vicky, did you unmute yourself deliberately and have a burning question that you wish to ask?
No, I was just pressing buttons.
Oh, that's fine. Fine. Feel free. Feel free. This is an important thing. And we just thought we would ask that. Does anyone have any questions for our folks, for Tim, about youth work? Have you any concerns or challenges? Lynn, is that you wanting to ask a question?
Yes, as you can see.
Let me just get you on here so that we can see you rather than me. There we go. Okay.
Hi there. Yeah, as you can see, I have a baby, and it was when you said you had a baby group. I actually only have met one other baby in my area since having my third child, and we are really keen. My husband's the minister at St Catherine's Argyll, but I'm really keen to open a baby group, and just wondered how they work. Can you give me how it works for you, your church? And
Absolutely, and I know that Louise in St Nicholas, they have one as well. Both our churches in Lanark actually have them.
Okay.
Ours is run by the church, and Louise, let me get you up here. Louise's is run by a charity or a group that uses the church for a playgroup. They both run slightly differently. Ours, we have.
I wasn't sure what to say in the rest of this. That's why I said I think I'll drift away. But then
let me just mute that person there. There we go. We have a slightly different system in that we have weekly places open up so that everyone has an equal chance of getting them for the things. At Nicholas, I think it's a session they book for. Is that right, Louise? A few weeks at a time?
Yeah, it's like a block booking. Ours is not run, it's not a church run, it's run by a local playgroup, which have branched out in order to meet the needs of the community. And
the two different ways that the two churches are hosting these things are really interesting. We bought, I never thought, if you see the size of me, my head's smaller than the rest of me. But I never thought that I would have MMA supplies in my search list on my internet browser. We bought big jigsaw mats that Taekwondo and Judos use in their thing. We bought 24 of them, so it's a 24 square meter area, which interestingly gives us enough space for 10 adults seated round 2 meters apart. The babies can go on the mat, the mums can sit at the edge of the mat, and there's a sense that they're all kind of together at that point. It's sanitized when it goes out. The toys are sanitized. We bought all new plastic toys or second-hand ones from a baby cooperative shop thing. They play, they have music, they just sit and chat and support one another. They sanitize everything at the end for the next group. Cleaner comes in, cleans around that. The next group come in, do the same. We take temperatures only as a precaution and as a thing for mums so that they know they're okay. We have contactless card payment. as well. And they come in for the next one, play, sanitize and put things away. So things are sanitized in between, things are sanitized before, and things are sanitized at the end. And everyone just mucks in. The important thing to remember is you are only allowed 10 adults. So if you have, and this is where it's different in St. Nicholas, if you have a play leader or two, you can't have as many children or adults. So the 10 includes play leaders. We are a self-run group with the mums, whereas St. Nicholas, is it 2 play leaders they have a session, Louise?
No, one play leader and 9 mums.
1 play leader and 9 mums. It's just something that you need to remember when you're doing it. But if I can say anything, please do it. Please do it. It is just so needed.
Are they allowed to take their masks off and bring their cup of tea?
Well, you can't serve them a cup of tea.
Okay.
However, if they bring an illicit cup of tea in their pram, then, you know,
okay,
I'm not that bad as the police, I promise. They can, there is an exemption in the government guidance that when mums are sitting with their babies, as long as they're distance from everyone else, they can wear the masks. So we say they can sit down, but they must put it on the minute they move away, if they go to the toilet or anything like that. And ours have been really respectful of that as well.
Perfect, thank you.
And hopefully, Lorna, that answers your question. That, yeah, you can't serve tea or coffee at the moment. Unfortunately, you can't have informal hospitality within a church setting at that point. All right.
And how do they book? Sorry, Brian.
We book. We have a WhatsApp group that we just broadcast. Everyone's encouraged to save it. We tell them on a Wednesday morning, or a Thursday morning, sorry, it's open at 8 o'clock, and we use a wonderful website called PickTime, PICKTIME, and you can set up your classes for free, and they just put their details down, and that's it all taken care of. PickTime are about to launch an adaptation to their website, which will then take PayPal payments for you as well. So they can pay on booking, which would be quite good. So please think about it and do it. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. Tim Frew has put up some of the YouthLink recovery guidance as well, which we will make sure that we circulate round as well. Can we ask everyone here who's on this call tonight to send an email, and we will keep posting it into the chat to childrenandyouth@churchofscotland.org.uk. Keep going and keep sending it, and Susie and Isabel will add you to the list. And what we're doing is we're getting them to send out any updates to guidance, as well as some much more exciting things in guidance. But please, there it is there. Susie's just posted it. Everyone, send an email if you want added into that as well. Now, Cranhill, Pamela, you wanted to ask a question. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't have the hands up icon on this machine.
That's all right.
It's just we're Nicola, who does our outreach mission, and we do an after school club. We're just about to start looking at doing that again, but in the church instead of the halls, which aren't ready. But for those who have additional support needs, I normally have a nest of bean bags, which I'm not going to be able to do because I can't really sanitize them because it'll soak into the balls. So has anybody used any other calming methods with additional support needs children when they've started up again?
Oh, no, that's a good question. Does anyone, we've got 203 people on here. Somebody's bound to have dealt with young folk with ASN. I'll go for the expensive option, Pamela. We've got lovely bean bags that you can actually sanitize and wash. They're double-sized bean bags. You need to get yourself. Yeah. We got them for the cinema that we're on. And it was, yeah, they are Comedy Youth Club, Fiona, exactly. They're the outdoor cushions, the barbecue cushion things, and they're fabulous things.
Yeah, the ones that we have were like that at one time, but they've gone through 6 youth groups. So
careless, very careless. That's right. Does anyone have Kirstine, have you got any ideas on this, or are you wanting another question? Just another question, yeah.
No, I've got ideas.
Fantastic.
I used to work in a special needs school. Have you used fidget toys before? Do you find anything like that helps? Or
Yeah, I've got a box of them. My original nurse training was in learning disabilities, and I'm the mental health chaplain at the hospital as well. So I have a big box of them. But again, it's a case of sanitising every single one, every nook and cranny.
Does music help at all?
We use music, yeah. We do use music.
I used to use headphones. I used to give them headphones just to keep them calm as well.
Yeah.
For a time, and that kind of worked.
Yeah, so I'll get a bag of headphones and make sure that they've all got the stickers with their own name on it, so it's their own set of cues.
There's some
sensory toys maybe as well.
Yeah, I've got those in the toddler cupboard, so I can haul them out. Yeah.
In terms of trying to clean every nook and cranny, I just use Milton. I have a big tub of Milton that we are going to be using for the creche toys.
That's what I use for the toddler group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for our toddler group plastic toys, we have a spray sanitizer, which is fabulous. You just spray it over and then give it a wipe. So it's actually not as time consuming as we thought to do all that. So yeah, fabulous. Okay, I'm going to
thank you.
Anyone else has got, thank you, Paula, and we wish you well with that. Now, who else? Let me see. We had a couple of people. Alan Childs had a question. Are you wanting to unmute yourself, Alan, and ask this? There we are.
Thank you. Yes, I was just wondering whether anyone has recently run a youth alpha online, aimed mostly at teenagers.
Okay. Has anyone done it? Scott Paget is on the lookout and scanning round and seeing anyone wildly waving hands. So if you have done it, wildly wave your hand for a few moments, and we'll see how we get there. No, looks like you could be a trendsetter, Alan. Are you thinking of doing it yourself?
Yes, I am, but I'll just declare my interest immediately. I have no youth in my congregation. I have a very elderly congregation, but I have done lots of youth work. I have done alphas. I would reckon that because it's online, you don't have to have people physically present in the same community. And typically with youth work, it helps if you have enough numbers. So if between us as 202 participants, if every 10th one of us could give one person that actually might be interested, we already have quite a nice conversation group.
Absolutely.
I'm just hoping maybe in due course, if in the Church of Scotland, we run one or multiple ones, then there might be enough interest. It seems as if it's going okay down south, but not yet up north.
Well, we've got one, and I'm just going to bring them in. Yeah, there you go. We have got someone who is doing it. What's your name? Sorry.
Susan White.
Susan, and where are you doing Youth Alpha?
Currently doing it with 5 teenage girls in Dunoon.
Oh, fabulous.
Yep.
Fabulous.
So,
and is it going well?
It is going fantastically well. The adherence is great. We are on session 6. We run it every other week on a Wednesday night, have some chat time beforehand, share screen, the video, do the pauses for the questions, have a good bit of chat time after and prayer. And yeah, they're sticking with it. It came out of a Kickstart online summer camp that we did. And so they were a D group, a discipleship group, and they wanted to keep meeting after that day. And so we have been. It's been great. Yep, works really well.
Brilliant. Well, there you go, Alan. You now know somebody in Dunoon that you can start having a conversation with, and we'll see how the group goes. You can let Susie know how well the group goes, and then we can see. I'm going to just invite Tim to come back in, because Tim had a really put up something from, I think it was the public health slides that they had before we go anywhere else, and that was about the risk of not doing things as well. Tim, can you expand on that? Because I think it's a really important point, because we are all a bit nervous about what we can do, and we've been told for 6 months, be careful, don't do, and now that shift seems to have taken place. So is there anything you can share with us on that one?
Yeah, I'm just lost my, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Right, so I didn't. Yeah, what I'll try and do is I'll try and send you these slides. Just to clarify, I want to go back on there was a comment about that I made about 77% of young people. I'll give you a more detailed breakdown of that. That was right towards the beginning of a lockdown, and those stats have come down, but they're still quite high actually. So if we're looking at young people in 12 to 13, 40% are concerned for their mental health and well-being, and 53% are concerned for others' mental health and well-being. 13 to 15-year-olds, 50% are concerned for their own mental health and well-being, and 60% are concerned for others' mental health and well-being. And 16 to 18-year-olds, 73% are concerned for their mental health and well-being, and 61% are concerned for others' mental health and well-being. But I will try and send you the slides. So I think, you know, what the bigger picture around, you know, being cautious, absolutely, and being safe. But what I would say is that people, a lot of the, I think people are being underconfident about their own ability to do risk assessments. And the things that I've seen, and I've actually been in Elgin recently, seeing some of the way that a youth centre developed their centre, put in screens, you know, had good kind of cleaning measures and so on. So I think there's a kind of, you know, a lack of confidence that we can do it for some people. And I think it's just being supported to realise actually, you know, there's lots of people, especially within churches, because you get so many people, haven't you, within the kind of voluntary world who have expertise, right, in so many different ways. And it's just applying those risk assessments into the premise that you're using. But meantime, there's outdoor opportunities, there's digital. So it's not about rushing everybody back into indoor work. There are, you know, especially in tier 3 and tier 4, we're still advising that, you know, if you can have kind of blended approaches, or you can target some of that provision, although there is a kind of maximum numbers, and that's quite important to have those maximum numbers, because there's some people working with young people and it's really an alternative to schooling for them. You know, this is, you know, they're maybe not engaging in school, so we need to have those opportunities, but it is about being proportionate and making sure that, you know, you have that. But in terms of the other harms, in terms of young people's physical well-being as well, and just, you know, obviously we think about obesity, think about kind of getting involved in physical activity. You look at education and educational opportunities and outcomes. You know, these things are very important going forward, you know, and especially as we're looking at a kind of longer term, you know, just at the moment, and into another full cycle in terms of young people's education for a year, then very much see youth work as a core component of that wider educational offer. So some of the things that young people are doing in uniformed groups, some of the badge work, Duke of Edinburgh's award, achievement awards, these things are all really important as that kind of wider educational offer. But on top of that, what's been mentioned in terms of, you know, a sense of belonging, a sense of community, being able to talk to a trusted adult about, you know, some of the things that you're thinking about and dealing with right now. There's only so much of that can be done, you know, through Zoom and through other things. Sometimes you need to have a safe place and a safe space to do that. So I suppose my appeal would be to those that have responsibility for church buildings in particular. Sometimes I've heard people saying, oh, you know, we're looking at the workforce rules, so we can't have our workers in to kind of use that space. I've heard people saying that, and actually if they're using that space to not do kind of admin jobs, you know, that the message about workplaces was people like me at the minute, actually, in terms of I can work from home, my organization can do that. We can do a lot of sort of digital and online stuff. But if you're working directly with young people, you might need access to some materials and activities and resources. So let's not be making people jump through barriers and hoops they don't need to. And it's an issue I'm going to bring up tomorrow with COSLA, actually, ensuring that some of the community centres are open as much as possible to young people, because that has been an issue. So it was an issue we highlighted in the media actually last week or the week before.
And I think it's a fair comment. And I think that, for example, our church office isn't open because it's not necessary, but our hall is open to allow things like the baby and mother and baby group, and that would be the same for youth work. and things like that. So I think it's about how you use the building and how you see that as well. Can I just come back? Got an interesting question there, and you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago on the education exemption in Sunday schools and how Sunday schools Bible classes played a part within that wider educational framework for our young people that attend. The latest rules around kind of level 3 and 4 talk about the kind of targeted approach, and this is, Stuart has picked this up, should be taken to face-to-face delivery across 3 and 4, targeting the ones who need it the most. You know, we should be looking at the numbers that we have. Obviously, when we get into tier 4, if we get into tier 4, numbers reduce. But I take it in terms of that exemption, Tim, we would still be able to gather our young people for a Sunday school, because, you know, the targeting is a very interesting way that they've framed that. But I take it would be okay to do that at level 3.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, there is a recognition that tier 3 and tier 4, there's a reason there's the levels, isn't there? So I don't need to kind of rehearse that, you know, in terms of spread of the virus and transmission. And so that's why in schools in tier 3 and 4, pupils in the senior phase are being asked to wear masks inside classrooms. So clearly there is a kind of, you know, a controlling and mitigating the spread of the virus. So what that phrase is, it's just to be clear, it's not about targeted work in that sense. It is about youth work and what youth work is in terms of that kind of that role. But what it is, it's a kind of a message really to people to say, make sure that what you're doing is purposeful in terms of indoor activity in particular. You know, have a think about that, plan for that, and you know, have you done a kind of risk-informed judgment around why you're needing to do that indoors if it can be done other ways? That's not to say you shouldn't do it, or you shouldn't have that, you know, you kind of have the sort of access and permission to do that, absolutely. I think this is one where it's about putting judgment and ownership back to people locally to decide on that as well, you know. So, you know, so there isn't a cap in the numbers in tier 3, so it can be up, you know, again, it's up to 13 in that tier. But, you know, there was discussions on the go around tier 4 being potentially complete, you know, closed down, and I'm glad that we haven't ended up in that place. But I think we need to be mindful of why that's the case and why we've put in this, that the government has put in a 5 kind of tier framework.
And I think I might have felt the same about churches, and maybe expected a bit more severe level 4 as well, that we weren't operating. And it was a surprise. I know Lucy commented on that earlier about the fact that we are still able to worship even at that point in church as well. Thank you. Lucy, there's actually one I think that would be helpful to have you in, if that's possible. Clifford, you've got a question on messy church and what you can do. Is it all right if we just bring you in to ask that? If you can just unmute yourself, is that okay?
Yes, good evening.
Let me just get you on the screen. There we are. Oh, is that you? Have I got you on?
Hopefully no. No,
that's the wrong person. Whoever that is, I'm very sorry, but it didn't work. You must have jumped up. There we go.
There we go.
Better.
Good evening. Yes, our messy church leaders are very keen to get restarted with face-to-face stuff. They've been doing stuff over the last few months with them at home, sending stuff home and doing bits and pieces, but they are really keen. Our hall currently has a COVID limit of 25 people. And I'm just actually wondering, because earlier it was said it should be treated as an act of worship. So what does that mean in terms of what they can actually do indoors if there's a limit of 25 in the hall?
Okay. In terms of the limit, I think where we were talking about worship is the worship is because that we feel. Well, Lucy, you talk about the worship exemption because you did a lot on that down south in terms of trying to make sure that the government understood what messy church was, didn't you?
It really just helps, I think, not to confuse it and just say we are an act of worship. therefore we follow the guidelines for the act of worship. So if your hall has got a limit of 25 COVID safe people in it, then that would apply for your messy church as well. So the only way that I can see that messy church can be done safely at the moment is a very tidy way, as I say, and it's outlined in the document, but it's basically bringing a family in to sit at a table for the duration, and they're not moving anywhere else. They've got everything they need at the table for 2 or 3 activities to do together, and they stay at the table for the activities and for the celebration. And of course, we can't do food at the moment, very sadly. So it's a really sanitized version in every sense of a messy church.
A very less messy church.
A very safe, very tidy, messy church. But and you know, the whole thing about having to wear masks means it's really difficult with children there, because they, you know, you want to smile at them. Smiling is such a huge part of messy church, and you can't smile, so there's lots of frantic waving and but yeah, it works and people appreciate it, but the difficulty, I think, being in the church or the building is the easy bit in a way. The hard bit is when they're leaving and they want to stand around and chat to each other. And of course, you know, all your wonderful sanitization and keeping them apart just goes to pot if they're going to cuddle up and chat on the church doorstep. So the risk assessment has to consider the arrivals and the leaving as well.
Yeah, and I think by dealing with it as a worship service, which it is, or an act of worship, it does mean that those different worship exemptions come in rather than the youth work education exemptions. So that does mean that if your building does allow and has the space for up to 50 people, which includes all the volunteers and everyone like that as well, then you're able to do that in Scotland at the moment. Which is fabulous, and I know it's something that we are very keen in Lanark to start looking at and how we can implement that. So I think I found loads of resources on the Messy Church website, Clifford, about how you can do perhaps small scale Messy Church in a different way with different families, keeping them all together, and hopefully the guidance on the church website, which Lucy very kindly allowed us to steal and Church of Scotlandify it, will hopefully walk you through it, including risk assessments and all those things, so that again, it's another thing that you can do, and you can perhaps think about as well. And I'm going to bring Tim in just now about the food. Thank you, Lucy, for that one, because this has been. Sarah asked about food. Now, one of the things that we've got to remember, and whatever Tim's about to say, I have to come with the places of worship guidance, which is the building in which most of you will meet, is that we are specifically banned from having informal hospitality, which means that for a parent and toddler group, and it's actually in the childcare guidance as well, the children's activities, you shouldn't be serving food or tea or coffee and refreshments. And, you know, whilst there might be some exemptions, we are as a building, it's not something that we are able to do at the moment, no matter how good you are at risk assessing. But public health is, yeah, definitely. It's there. Tim, did you glean anything about that over your conference over the week?
No, sorry if I've caused you a problem there by putting that in terms of the youth work more broadly. I mean, this is a challenge for youth work, isn't it? Because we are sitting in different settings. We're in community centres, we might be in a leisure centre, we might be in a school, we might be in a church hall, and it's one of the challenges, I suppose, of all of that. So I was just pasting something from our general guidance. But just to give you an example, I was up in in Highland seeing young people doing outside kind of bake-off session, and they had set up a big marquee because they couldn't get into the building at the minute, which rather frustratingly to do the activity, but they had a massive marquee, and actually it was part of their it was, I mean, I say it was bake off, but it was actually for young people in that sort of 15 to 16 age range. Maybe they weren't going to, some of them weren't at school. So it was actually a kind of quite an educational planned purposed activity with a lot of fun in it. And so, that's how that works within a more informal space. I think I'll absolutely leave it to you there, Bryan, in terms of the Church of Scotland, what that means and what you can and can't do. But, that's in other places, it's maybe used quite a lot. It's certainly, crikey, I can't remember doing youth work without pizzas involved at some point in the past, but there may be ways and means to think about how these things can be done outdoors and in other ways.
I think that's the challenge. It is about how you do it and just how you think that through, because it is interesting that, in the childcare guidance, the government have actually said parent and toddler groups, you shouldn't be offering refreshments and things like that. So there are some, to be fair, there are inconsistencies across the guidance. And if you've ever heard Jason Leach or anyone speak on this, it's because it really is a balancing act. And they're almost doing one thing and they might not be able to do the same thing in another sector because it could have one of those effects that causes a tipping point. And that's why these things are a little bit different as well. So it is a very difficult area because in lots of parts of the guidance, the government do say you shouldn't even bring your own, and it is a challenge. But I think as we go through the next 6 months or so, I think that will become clearer as we go through, as different groups start back, because you've got to remember there aren't that many groups that have started over the last few months. I think, Tim, you and I spoke, and I know you've got to watch your time, but just very briefly before you went, you and I spoke a few weeks ago about the challenge of youth work finding space to meet sometimes, and you mentioned that earlier on, and hopefully churches can begin to think about how they could even host some youth work, even temporarily, until other spaces open up.
We have a massive issue around poverty. We have a massive issue around holiday hunger, and I think churches and communities are in and around that space. So I certainly would be asking the question. There were certainly exceptions, especially for vulnerable children and young people, maybe not getting access to food and breakfast before going to school. So these are things where I think it is, and we do need to kind of be asking the questions, and always we will stop and say, that always goes to public health, that always goes to national clinical directors and others to say, okay, you can do that, and okay, you can't do this. So that's always somebody else's call. But I certainly feel it's important that, from youth work more broadly, and thinking of the ways that we work, there's quite a few young people not back in school yet at all that haven't come back. And we need to be, absolutely mindful of how we're supporting them. I have to just put a wee plug into some of the local churches in the area that I'm in, because tonight we got some cakes delivered to us, and I had no idea. I don't go to a church locally here, but apparently this is something that just the church has been doing, that I found out about. They've just been doing it across everybody in the area, and they've been doing it over a period of months, which is, they're not doing it all at once, but they're just putting little gifts to people in their doors. So I got a box of 4 cakes tonight. So that felt a bit mint coming to speak to you guys in the, in the Church of Scotland tonight.
That is absolute genius. So there's the challenge. How do you feed your community with cakes and nice things? So yeah, Tim, for us, and we're going to go on with some more questions, but I know that you've got important family duties to go to just now. So can I say on behalf of everyone, thank you for your time, and thank you for your work, and for being such a strong advocate for youth work and for young people, and helping us as well as a church writing our guidance through that slight minefield as well. So we can't all clap because it becomes a bit of a nightmare. We all get feedback, but thank you so much at the end of a busy 2 days.
No, likewise, and it's been great to be here. And if you do come up with questions, and I always say after I've said anything that somebody might correct me from my organisation tomorrow by email of something that I've said, and I'm more than happy for that to happen. But if there are emails, thoughts, questions, things that we've not covered tonight, please do let us know. But it's been great to join you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tim. Cheers. Thank you. I think in terms of the food, Lucy, you put up a really important point there as well, in terms of just thinking about the practicalities of food as well, and stickiness, cleaning upness and things like that. Oh, are you there? Sorry. Hey.
Sorry, did you want me to comment?
I just thought it was a really helpful, really helpful thought.
It is heartbreaking. And of course, a lot of the activities that we do in Messy Church and in all sorts of children's ministry and youth ministry, they involve food. You know, you make things with food. The standard decorated biscuit is not possible at the moment, and it's a pain. But it's for us in England, we've been told very clearly, don't do anything with food. Just full stop. Don't food or drink. It might be different in Scotland. I can't say that, but certainly the clearing up. None of us are going to leave a table covered with crumbs of biscuits and pools of chocolate and bits of golden syrup on the table, and that puts the people clearing up at risk. And I'm sure it can be done safely, but it's just it's another thing to think about, to assess, to work out, and perhaps if and Bryan can say, if it is possible to do it in Scotland under your current regulations, maybe actually saying, no, it's really worth it, and it's worth the extra hassle. Perhaps you want to say that, but for us in England at the moment, it's just not.
I do think that in Scotland it's almost that stage as well, Lucy. I think the more you read the guidance, the more it's quite clear that we shouldn't be doing it as routine. We are not allowed to do it as a place of worship, so any church-run youth work or anything like that just can't do it at the moment. We're not allowed informal hospitality. It's written into the mother and baby groups that we shouldn't serve that. So I think there are really strong indicators as well. And I think one of the things for me is that we all have a desire to go back to what we knew, because we know that works and we're quite comfortable with it. But sometimes we can't do these things, and we need to perhaps accept lament. Lament is a wonderful theological moment where you can just beat your chest and cry into the wind at the things that we can't do anymore. And it's okay to do that. And it's okay, as Louise said, to moan lots. And that's fine as well. But lament is something that's important. We can't always do what we want to do, and we certainly at the moment can't do what we used to do. So it is just those small steps and incremental steps, and not immediately going straight into the messy church with food, with whatever. It's about just thinking about all those different things, and that's really helpful, Lucy, what you shared with about the cleaning up and things like that, because that is an extra bit as well. So
I think it's also worth thinking, Bryan, about why we're so passionate about food, and I think for all of us it's about hospitality. It's about an expression of welcome and love and equality and acceptance, and wanting to show God's abundance and provision for us. It's food. It says all that, and that's why we have the sacraments, isn't it? Because that's contained in food, the divine and the human coming together in something so everyday. It's a really precious thing. But we've talked about creativity. We've talked about reimagining things for the present time, and perhaps going back to, rather than saying, oh, we need to do food, perhaps going back to the principle behind it and saying, how let's forget about food, but what about hospitality? How can we re-demonstrate, reimagine hospitality? And when you would go back to the principle, that might take us in a different direction for how that abundance and provision and generosity of God can be expressed in a different way.
And I think we've got very strong lessons of that throughout the world church and different cultures as well, and perhaps we are a bit fixated on feeding people. I love it. It's why I became a minister, so that I could graze the tables at coffee mornings. God called me into that service quite selflessly. I gave up my beach body for it as well. But I do wonder if there's an opportunity theologically with families, with young people, to actually explore the other side of that hospitality. Not only, Lucy, as you say, the principles behind it, but also how do other cultures welcome when perhaps they don't have the abundance of food that we might know, or the ready access to food that we might have? Are there lessons there that we can explore with young people? Can we explore and open up the whole idea of social justice and how we need to try and walk a mile in other people's shoes? Think about how we go. I think there's something that could be explored there through our lack of ability to eat together. What does that mean to us? How does it feel? And how does it feel for others who don't have that? I just wonder if there's something that could be explored there at some point as well on the flip side. Object lessons. Yeah. We've got some other questions coming in, and I'm going to ask people with their hands up. Isabel, you've been very, very patiently with your hands up, so I'm going to do this and go. There you go. Isabel is our children's worker within the Church of Scotland, and has been doing a lot of work supporting many of you during this COVID pandemic as well. So Isabel, over to you for some words of wisdom.
Thanks, Brian. I actually put it in the chat but forgot to take my hand down. Really just suggesting that is there an encouragement to be creative in working together with a neighbouring church, a number of different churches, to do some things together, to share the effort of making videos, to share the effort of running a youth alpha, that sort of thing, to serve wider than our own congregation. So maybe kind of God's challenging us to do things in slightly different ways and work together collaboratively a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Fabulous. Thank you. Now, who else have we got? We had some other people. Debbie, you've had your hand up. Can I just, sorry, there we go. If you just unmute yourself, and then I'm going to pop you on here. Welcome. Where are you from, Debbie?
Winchborough in West Lothian.
Very nice.
So we've had, in this year, has been a bit of a double whammy, because along with the virus, even before that hit, we were out of our building because it was kind of falling down. So kind of a disaster year. But we've been kind of doing things online as much as possible. We're managing easier with the teenagers online more than the younger ones. But what I was wondering is, we've not got many other halls and stuff around us to try and use, although we are looking into getting a marquee, because we used a marquee last year when the building first got closed down. But we're looking for a more substantial one. But I was just wondering, do you think it's worth trying to get in with these other halls and stuff, or is it better to avoid that risk and try and focus on what we're going to do, or what?
Oh, there you go. Well, I do think that you need to do what's right for your own community, and you'll know that best. And if that is about looking at other spaces, then it's there. And I think what you have to satisfy yourself as an organizer of an event, a volunteer or a leader, is that you need to satisfy yourself that any space that you use that is allowed to be used would meet the same standard as we would expect in the church for keeping young people safe and keeping folks safe. So what's their risk assessment? And every public building should have a risk assessment, a COVID risk assessment, that they should give to anyone who uses it as well, just as we have to any groups. So I think if it's the difference between work happening and not, then I think you may want to look at the spaces around you, and go with what feels right for your area, but just make sure whatever you do is safe. And I think that would be really, really important. And you've got an offer from Kirstine, who I'm just going to bring on, that she's just at Kirtliston, just along the road. That seems to just chime perfectly with what Isabel was saying about looking at ways to share and to do that. So I feel like we're a bit like a dating agency tonight. It's great. An alpha group sorted. We've got the west of Edinburgh sorted. I mean, you'll be heading to Rathonet. No, I wouldn't go there. No, definitely not. That's where my mother-in-law is. So no. But use whatever you think is best, I think, for you and your own community, and you'll know what that feels like. All right. And if we can be of any guidance, then email the COVID team and ask those questions as well. All right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Now I'm going to go on to Kirstine, because you've had your hand up as well, and
yeah. So for Debbie, just to say that I'm happy for you to get in touch, or you to get in touch with me to discuss options and stuff. So just give me a shout if you want. But I just want to, I know this has probably been asked before, but our church, I'm at Kirtliston, and we've been without a minister for over a year. So everything I'm doing just now is going through Kirk session, it's going through, like, I've got to go through hoops and everything. And to be honest, I'm trying to kind of navigate this on my own without a minister for support just now. And I'm finding it to be really difficult and really exasperating, having to go through 800 committees to get an answer to one question. So what I'm wanting to ask is, we have an outreach group. Our church is open for worship, but it's not being used for worship. It's been used for private prayer, and nobody's really using it. Our church hall hasn't been permission. It's not open yet, so we can't use it to open. I know my new minister's on the way, but he's not here yet. So I've been trying to work out how to engage with our children. And I do an outreach in a part of our village where the children are, they don't have so much. And I've not been able to connect with them since basically the start of lockdown, because the Zoom thing doesn't work with them, and it's just been really, really hard. And I spoke to my session clerk about planning an outing for, I know we're going to have Christmas later, but I need to book this in advance. So planning an outing for them. Can I ask, am I allowed to do this? I've another 2 leaders with me, and we're planning just to go, there's a local adventure playground. And my thoughts are just taking a group of them there. What is the limit on numbers? Am I allowed to do that?
I'm going to cry. And
don't tell me no.
She's about to cry as well, because I'm sitting there thinking, I would love to just turn around and say, yeah, I know the answer to that one, but I don't. So I'm going to commit to getting the answer, and I'm going to ask you to email me at bcare@churchofscotland.org.uk, and we will find that out. I think there are challenges when you organise something to go out. No doubt about that at the moment. I think how you get young people there, who's responsible for them, what that risk assessment is. I mean,
it's a walking distance thing. So my kind of thought was, our parents drop them off. We have permission. We have emergency contacts, risk assessments, etc. But my session clerk is like, oh, I don't know if you can do outside activities. So
the difficulty I think you have is around whether such an activity can be classified under the youth work guidelines.
Under 12s?
That doesn't.
That's the same.
That doesn't matter. The youth work. Right. I think that would make it slightly more challenging, actually, if they're under 12. Just in terms of what you can do. But Susie's right, that educational focus in order to do it. It's a difficult one, but listen, we're not saying no, especially on video, and we're definitely, just in case Bryan Ald's watching this, we're not saying yes, definitely, but we will go and double check, and we will get back to you. There's a way that you can do things, and I think we'll look at it. And I would say that if your church has 800 committees to get permission for, I think I've just spotted your minister's first task.
I know, good luck, Tom.
709 of them.
That's right. You're at least 784.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we will, Christine, we will look at that if you email us. All right.
Thank you so much. It's just that, and I do apologise if anyone was asked, it's just I'm without any kind of lead at the minute, and I'm just trying to connect, and the frustration level's getting higher and higher with the fact that I just can't do anything. I'm like, oh.
Important thing, like everyone, as Susie said at the beginning, is just it's okay not to do things at times.
I know.
And
I just would love to
just breathe.
I miss them.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
We will see what we can do with that as well. We've got
Thank you so much.
We've got a few more hands up, but just before we go to somebody else, Susie, the old favourite of face masks or face coverings has come up as well. Someone's asked. Anne has said she's not 100% clear on the rules for face coverings in children. Who is?
I don't think anybody is.
Not met that person yet personally. Now, inside a place of worship, anyone over the age of 5 without an exemption or a reasonable excuse has to wear a face covering. That's not just for worship, that's in a place of worship. Okay, so a building that the religious body has responsibility for. So, for example, our Taekwondo group that use the hall come in and keep their masks on when they're changing their shoes and only take their masks off when they're standing on their spot ready to Taekwondo it up. When they're finished that, they put their mask back on. The same with the dance school. So I think good practice is that it's there. And please remember that the face covering rule in places of worship is not guidance. It's actually law. It's part of the coronavirus health protection law, the regulations. So please just remember that. And the default position is people should wear it. We had a service last week for a minister preaching so nominee. We had 11 children there from the age of 4 up to 14, and all of them wore a mask and were happy to wear it. So I think there's this apprehension that maybe children won't wear them. Actually, sometimes that's not as founded as we think.
Yeah, but I think when we do it, we do have to be quite careful with those that do have a legitimate exemption, that we're not victimizing them or making them feel awful or kind of what have you within that, but equally recognize that there could be some, particularly those with additional needs. And I know, because I've got one in my kind of children's group, that actually the very sight of somebody in a mask is enough to send her into absolute total meltdown. And so we have to be quite careful and think through actually who are the people that we have, and therefore what can we be offering, and how can that kind of work best. And just definitely there are so many layers to it. There really are, and we just need to be really careful about that. I've got 2 more questions. I remember this person from the last time. Is he still there? Alexander McNamara, 3rd KK. I tell you, it's that posh person for Glasgow direction. You're feeding back.
There we are.
There you are.
That should be that sorted. Where's that one? There we go. That any better?
Go for it.
There we are. The problem is I've got a soundbar right behind this. So I'm actually here with a bit of a solution for a lot of people. It covers additional support needs, it covers food problems, and it covers a housekeeping. For all 3, personally, I would recommend looking at South Ayrshire Autistic Society and other youth charities that have been kicking around. They have actually been some of the fastest responders in this crisis, in honesty. South Ayrshire Autistic Society, for example, they do online videos with activities and get the kids to send the work back to them. They have been delivering food parcels with appointments, and with those appointments, it allows the children and families to stand at their door when they're collecting the parcel, and for the charity workers to stand at the other end of the garden path. So there's still a bit of communication. As much as the children can't then run up and give them hugs or whatever it is that we normally do, it's still a bit better than anything else that is possible. So if you're working in a community and you are worried about food poverty, which took about 20,000 comments in our chat this evening, if you're worried about the interaction that we have with kids, which has been about a good half hour worth of the conversation this evening, all of those should actually be able to help. And it's one solution covers it all.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. What we will do is we'll try and make sure that we can get some of those resources out there as well, which is great. Just before we go to a couple of final questions, Janet was asking about numbers for Sunday Club in the hall during Sunday worship and Sunday school age youth club in the hall. Now, what's really, 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 really important about this is whether the children and young people go into church at any point. If your Sunday school is a traditional Church of Scotland Sunday school where the young people start in church or go in at some point for a children's talk and then come out, they must be counted within the maximum 50 for worship, even if they go out to their own activities, okay? Because they're in worship, they are part of that 50, and that's it. You might have 10 of them that you take out to Sunday school, and that leaves 40 in worship, but you can't fill up with another 10 off the street. Okay, 50 if that's the case. If your Sunday club is meeting in a hall, the parents are dropping them off, and there's no, they don't go into church at all for worship, then it's 30, which includes the leaders, as long as it's a formal program and it's educational, etc., etc. And the same for your youth group. If they're meeting in the same place, the same kind of suite of halls, then you need to think about combining those numbers to 30. I'm looking at Susie, hoping she's going to nod that that's roughly correct.
Yes, it would just be a question on whether your secondary school age youth club, what that actually is, in terms of is that a kind of Bible class kind of educational activity, or is that a social drop-in kind of youth club? Because if it's the social drop-in type of youth club, then actually then that they're not really covered at the moment by the youth work kind of guidance. So actually it would be different.
I was taking it that it was kind of Sunday school and Bible class type thing, but if it's not, then if it's a, yeah, definitely, if it's a drop-in youth club, then that's a bit of a problem at the moment for us. 2 people had their hands up, and Scott had that there. Katie McDowell had your hand up. Katie, are you there?
Hello.
Hi. I'm just here. Oh, I see you there. Hang on, let me do this. There we go. Nice to see you, Katie. What's your
Hi. Our Sunday school started back last Sunday. I have a copy of an email from yourself, Bryan, that was sent. One of the questions that we had asked was about what we can and can't do for starting back. If I can read that out, you've got on it, adults should stay 2 meters away from children wherever possible. That's fine. There are also rules about when children should distance from each other, outlined in the guidance. What are these rules? I'm not quite sure.
So if, depending on ages, there are different ways. So even young
age 3 to 11.
Age 3 to 11 is a bit different. But what the government have done is they've taken children and young people and kind of put the guidance in with different ages. I think 3 to 11, it's different. I think they are able to not distance from one another, but 12 plus, they would have to best practices they do. And I think when we have the different levels. And normally when people are asking about Sunday school and children and things like that, we do just try to make sure that in our guidance there's a section where it talks about things like that and distancing, etc. So we try to point people to that just so they've got the full gamut, because every church is different in terms of the ages. So I hope that helps.
Okay, and they or don't they all have to wear face masks? They do? They don't?
As we said earlier, the exemption is if you are under 5,
yeah,
or have a medical exemption,
right,
or have a reasonable excuse because of the activity you're doing. Unless you are doing martial arts or karate or something in the middle of your Sunday school, I can't imagine it being an energetic exercise that they're going to have to take off masks for. So I think in that instance, masks or face coverings would be really important.
So the 5 and overs.
Yep, someone came up with a really nice idea that why don't groups, if you're starting to meet back, get your own church face coverings printed. There's lots of companies out there that are doing logo printing on face coverings. Get the children to design it, make them feel part of the group, make them feel part of the club that they are a part of, the gang that they're in, the Sunday school that they're in, and actually make it a thing, part of what they do. So, but yes, anyone over with that.
Okay. I think because in the schools they're not wearing them. I was under the impression
that absolutely.
I didn't think they had to wear them, so I got that wrong.
Worship, and I think we've tried to be exceptionally clear in the guidance on this. In a place of worship, then it has to be that face masks or face coverings are worn.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter whether it's for worship or not. It's just that. Yeah. Thank you. There's Matthew McKenzie's asking if a BB Hall is counted as a place of worship. Matthew, it's counted as a place of worship if it is under the liability and jurisdiction of the religious body, the Kirk session. If a Boys Brigade company are doing it themselves and it's their own building, it's their own space, I think that's a Boys Brigade hall rather than a place of worship. So hopefully that's it. Alexander, the organisation you referred to was the South Ayrshire Artistic Society. Somebody's asking that as well. Oh, there it is. It's down. It's just appeared there. Is there anyone else, just as we finish, is there anyone else that's got any burning questions that we haven't answered, or has anyone not had an opportunity to answer or ask a question as well? Sorry, a church hall. Erica, you're asking about a church hall that's got an authorised cafe. In what way? Is that in terms of wearing face coverings, yeah?
Yes, yeah. And yeah, because what we've got is a church cafe that's got permission from Presbytery to reopen. We're just having all the work done on the hall for deep cleaning and stuff at the moment, but we need, but from what you're saying, in terms of wearing face coverings and so on, it has been used. It's been used for Christingles and things like that, but it's more of a community hall than but it is owned by the church.
Owned by the church, it's liable by the church, it's therefore defined in the government regulations as a place of worship.
So they have to wear face masks when they come in, which we expected, but obviously they're coming into a cafe, so they have to.
I don't know about you, but I've found it quite difficult to eat a Big Mac mask. I normally have to take it off at that point.
Well, that's right. I'm just trying to work out how that's going to happen if it's a place of worship while they're drinking their coffee.
We're not asking cafes to liquidize their food offerings and give everyone a straw. But I think it's important that we just look and abide by these rules and try as much as we can to make sure that things are there. I've got one final thing just to say, and there was a little bit of chat earlier on about, the food and whether we get chippies in or do this, and somebody mentioned the word loophole. As Tim said, these rules are here because we're in a pandemic and they're here to keep us safe. We might not like them. My word, there are lots that I don't like, and I know there are lots my colleagues in this presbytery don't like because they tell me on a regular basis. But they're here. And there's a whole part in scripture that talks about, you know, paying Caesar what is Caesar's, and about making sure that we follow the rules that are in place for us by the government. Actually, we need to think about that and what our response is to that. It's not about trying to find ways around it. The government used the phrase at the moment, or the civil servants, about don't be cute. You know, in other words, don't flutter your eyelids and try to think that it's a nice way around it if you can do this, but only if you can do that. Actually, let's think about why these rules are here at the moment and just try a little bit to stick within them, accept sometimes that they're really not where we'd want to be, but that we are still able to work, and there's a lot of places that we're still very privileged to be able to work and do things. So please, my plea to you is don't try to find loopholes. Don't try to be cute about things. But if you have any questions, then you can make sure that you email us. You can go to the Children and Youth email. You can go to COVID-19 guidance email, and they will all get to us, and we will make sure the appropriate people ask them and answer them for you. We are always here to help on the COVID team. And I know Susie and Isabel are always here to help. Once again, childrenandyouth@churchofscotland.org.uk. It's in the chat. Copy it, send an email, be added to the list, and that way you'll get as much information as you can. I'm glad that so many people came along tonight, and I hope that we'll be able to do another one of these maybe later on as well, once things change again. But I'm going to hand over to Louise to finish tonight, if that's okay, and say thank you to our speakers for tonight. It's been really, really good to have everyone here with us tonight. So Louise, over to you.
Sorry, just had remembrance music playing in my ear. So just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has taken part in tonight. I hope you all found it worthwhile. I know I certainly have got lots to take away from this evening. I think for me, to sum it up, would be connectedness, relationships, focus on what we can do, not what we can't do. That's a big one for me. And out of chaos comes creativity. So I'd like to say a massive thank you to Susie, to Tim, to Lucy, to Bryan, and to everyone who came along and participated. And we hope that you have got something helpful from tonight, but please do get in touch with any of us or with the COVID group about specific things that you have issues with. We can do whatever we can to help. But now, just to close, I thought I would lead us in prayer, and a prayer for our children and young people. So let us still our hearts this evening and gather before God in prayer. Let us pray. Loving God, in a world of harmony and brokenness, in a world of peace and conflict, in a world of fear and anxiety, protect our children and young people from actions that would harm, from words that would wound, and the hurt of broken promises. We give thanks tonight for our children and young people, for their vibrancy, their creativity, their ability to see things as they are, their sense of injustice, and their desire to build a fairer world. We pray for your protection in their lives. Help us to recognize stress and sadness, despair and loneliness, to share the burden in whatever way we can, to find the place where help is waiting. Loving God, be our guide. Bless and protect our young children and young people. May they grow and flourish in the beauty of the world that you have made. We ask this and all our prayers through Jesus Christ, our Lord and our Saviour. Amen.